This story contains themes that some listeners may find intense or disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Imagine a sound you've heard your entire life. A sound so common, so mundane you barely register it anymore. The hiss of an empty radio frequency. The white noise of static. Now imagine that sound changes. Not just a faint crackle, but something deliberate. Something almost structured. That's what David Miller heard. And what he heard, what he uncovered, would unravel his world and perhaps ours too. David had always been drawn to the echoes of the past. His cluttered apartment above his vintage electronics repair shop, in a quiet corner of upstate New York, was a testament to that obsession. Tubes glowed with a soft, amber light from various radios, oscilloscopes hummed, and the faint scent of solder hung perpetually in the air. He specialized in bringing dead technology back to life, coaxing forgotten voices from the silent circuitry of a bygone era. For David, every old radio held a story, a whisper of the lives it had once touched. But the story he was about to uncover wasn't one of nostalgia. It was a premonition. It started subtly, as these things often do. A late autumn night, the kind where the air outside bites and the silence inside is almost absolute. A storm had rolled through earlier, knocking out power for a few hours. When the lights flickered back on, David was already at his workbench, hunched over a particularly stubborn Philco Cathedral radio from the 1930s. It was a beautiful piece, dark wood, ornate grille, a relic of optimism in simpler times. He'd been struggling with it for weeks, a persistent, unidentifiable hum distorting every signal. Tonight, though, the hum was gone. Instead, when he finally got it to power on, there was the static. But it wasn't the familiar, comforting blanket of white noise. This static tasted like ozone and felt like a whisper against your eardrum. Even when the volume was barely audible, it was sharp, almost coated. He frowned, adjusting the tuning knob slowly, meticulously, across the entire AM band. Nothing but the same peculiar hiss, unwavering, like a phantom station broadcasting on every single frequency. He tried the shortwave bands, then the FM. The same anomaly. It defied logic. A radio, especially one this old, shouldn't behave like this. It should pick up something, a distant talk show, a Spanish-language station bleeding through, maybe even just the faint pulse of a number station if the conditions were right. But this was pure, unadulterated, unnatural static. He grabbed his spectrum analyzer, a modern piece of equipment that looked jarringly out of place amidst the bakelite and brass. He hooked it up to the Philco's output, his brow furrowed in concentration. The screen lit up, displaying the frequency spectrum. His eyes widened. The static wasn't a flat line, a uniform distribution of noise as it should be. There were peaks, valleys, rhythms, like a heartbeat or a coded message, etched into the very fabric of the noise. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to the ear, but visually it was undeniable. The static had a waveform. It had structure. David, a man who lived by logic and the immutable laws of physics, felt a chill creep up his spine that had nothing to do with the draft from the window. He spent the next few hours immersed, recording the output, running it through filters, trying to isolate the patterns. He ate a cold sandwich without tasting it, his coffee growing stale beside him. The more he analyzed, the more convinced he became. This wasn't random atmospheric interference. This wasn't a failing component. This was designed. There were repetitions, sequences of short bursts followed by longer silences, then a series of rapid-fire clicks, almost like frantic Morse code, but without the familiar rhythm of dots and dashes. He used a digital signal processor to clean up the audio, amplifying the subtle shifts within the static, hoping to reveal a hidden message. What emerged was less a message and more a sonic tapestry of dread. It was like listening to a language spoken by something that didn't have lungs or a tongue, a language of pure electrical impulses. He started noticing specific patterns. A sequence of 5 short bursts, a pause, then 3 long bursts, followed by a series of 7 rapid pulses. This sequence, he found, repeated every 27 seconds. Not perfectly, mind you, but with a slight, almost organic variation, as if it were a living thing. He cross-referenced it with known communication protocols, amateur radio frequencies, even SETI data. Nothing. It was unique. Alien. His initial scientific curiosity slowly morphed into a gnawing obsession. He neglected his other repairs, the half-finished projects piling up on his workbench. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. He rigged up multiple recording devices, setting them to capture the static continuously. He even tried moving the Philco to different parts of his apartment, then to his shop, then even briefly outside, hoping to identify an external source. The static remained constant, unwavering, originating from the Philco itself, yet seemingly broadcasting from nowhere and everywhere at once. He started drawing diagrams, filling notebooks with waveforms, numerical sequences, and frantic theories. Was it some kind of experimental military broadcast? A forgotten Cold War project resurfacing? But even the most advanced clandestine signals usually had a source, a direction, a frequency. This was a pervasive broadband phenomenon, originating from a single antique device. One particularly cold morning, the sun barely peeking through the perpetual autumn haze, David was reviewing hours of recorded static. He developed software to visually represent the patterns, turning the abstract noise into a sort of digital hieroglyph. He zoomed in on a particularly dense segment, a sequence he'd identified as a recurring motif. He adjusted the playback speed, slowing it down to a crawl. The individual clicks and bursts stretched out, becoming distinct, almost like individual notes in a haunting, discordant melody. And then he saw it, or rather, he heard it, in the stretched-out silence between two distinct bursts. A faint, almost subliminal tone, a single pure frequency buried deep within the noise, so subtle that only the extreme slowdown and meticulous filtering could reveal it. It was like a single sustained note on a cello, deep and resonant, lasting only a fraction of a second, but undeniably present. He isolated that tone, played it back, again, and again. It was always there, at that precise point in the sequence. It wasn't random. It was placed, deliberate. And then as he listened to it loop, something else clicked into place. The tone wasn't just a single note. It was the same tone he'd heard years ago, a specific frequency that had been used in an old, experimental radio beacon he'd studied in college, a beacon designed for deep space communication. A beacon that had been decommissioned decades ago, deemed a failure. His heart hammered against his ribs. This couldn't be a coincidence. He overlaid the tone from his college notes onto the isolated static tone. Perfect match. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just static with a pattern. This wasn't just a language. This was a response. And if it was a response, then something or someone was sending it. And if something was sending it, then David, alone in his apartment, had just opened a door to a conversation he was never meant to hear. A conversation that now, inexplicably, seemed to be happening through his old Philco radio. He fiddled with the dial again, a frantic energy seizing his fingers, desperately trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was interference from a new microwave, or a faulty wire, or a particularly elaborate prank from a neighbor with a powerful CB radio. He spun the tuning knob from one end of the band to the other, past legitimate stations broadcasting late-night infomercials and soft jazz, past the dead air, and back to the precise frequency where the static had coalesced into something more. Each time he returned, the low, guttural murmur was there, a pulsing, rhythmic ebb and flow that felt less like random noise and more like a breath that was not his own. He unplugged the radio, waited a full minute, his heart hammering against his ribs, then plugged it back in. The tubes glowed with an eerie orange light, the familiar hum of the electronics returned, and then the conversation resumed, exactly where it had left off, as if it had simply been waiting for power, patiently biding its time. This wasn't a power surge. This wasn't a loose connection. He grabbed his phone, opened a radio app and scanned the same frequencies. Nothing but the expected white noise, flat and uninteresting. He then pulled out his old handheld scanner, the kind amateur radio enthusiasts used to pick up police and fire transmissions, and tuned it to the exact same spot on the dial. Silence. Utter, empty silence. The Philco was the only one picking it up. It was proprietary, a private channel. A cold dread seeped into David's bones, chilling him more effectively than the late-night draft from his single-pane window. This wasn't external interference. This wasn't a trick of the airwaves. This was internal to the radio, yet it wasn't a malfunction. It was too deliberate, too alive. He sat there, hunched over the glowing dial, listening, his mind reeling. He tried to discern words, fragments of speech, anything recognizable, but it wasn't a language he knew. It was like listening to a deep-sea creature communicate, or the sounds of a distant, alien wind whispering ancient secrets. A series of deep clicks, sharp hisses, and low resonant thrums, punctuated by what sounded uncannily like long drawn-out sighs, full of an unknown grief or perhaps a profound weariness. Days bled into nights. David's life, once a meticulously organized routine of coding, gym, and fastidious apartment upkeep, began to unravel. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford, haunted by the thought that he might miss a crucial moment, a subtle shift in the pattern, a new word in the alien lexicon. He started keeping a notebook, scrawling down observations, exact times, and perceived changes in the static's rhythm. His handwriting, usually neat and precise, became increasingly frantic, ink bleeding into the pages. He researched radio phenomena, electromagnetic anomalies, even fringe theories about interdimensional communication and quantum entanglement. He found forums filled with crackpots and true believers, but nothing that explained his specific, terrifying reality. Most stories involved clear voices, number stations, or Morse code. This was different. This was raw, primal sound, yet undeniably structured, carrying an implied meaning just beyond his grasp. He tried to share his discovery. He called his friend, Michael, a cynical software engineer who usually found humor in everything. "Mike, you won't believe this, but my old Philco radio, it's talking." A pause. Then Michael's dry chuckle laced with concern. "Talking, David? Like, hey, how's the weather?" Or more like, "I am Skynet, your doom is nigh?" David sighed, running a hand through his increasingly disheveled hair. "No, not like that. Static. But it has a pattern. A rhythm. It's like a language, but not one I understand. It's intricate, Mike. I've been recording it." "Right. And I just found a portal to Narnia in my fridge. Look, man, you've been working too hard. Seriously. You sound strung out. Get some sleep. Maybe lay off the late-night coding sessions, or whatever bizarre vintage radio hobby you've picked up." The dismissal stung, but David understood. It sounded insane. Even to him, sometimes in the harsh light of day, he questioned his own sanity, the bags under his eyes growing darker by the hour. But then he'd turn on the radio, and the conversation would resume, pulling him back into its strange, compelling, terrifying orbit. He stopped trying to explain. He became more secretive, more isolated. The radio became his sole companion, his confessor, his tormentor. He started noticing things about the language. There were distinct phrases, repeated sequences of clicks and thrums that occurred with unnerving regularity. Sometimes the sighs would grow louder, more pronounced, almost mournful, resonating deep in his chest. Other times the rhythm would quicken, like an agitated heartbeat, a frantic urgency he couldn't decipher. One evening, as a furious storm raged outside, rattling his window panes and flickering the lights in his dimly lit apartment, the static on the Philco seemed to respond to the atmospheric pressure. The deep thrums became more resonant, the clicks sharper, almost urgent, cutting through the thunder. It was as if the radio was struggling to be heard over the storm's fury, or perhaps communicating with it, joining a larger, unseen chorus. David, fueled by an endless supply of lukewarm coffee and a desperate, gnawing need for understanding, had set up a makeshift recording studio in his living room. He hooked up an old cassette recorder to the Philco's auxiliary output, capturing hours upon hours of the mysterious signal. He played it back, slowing it down to a crawl, speeding it up to an incomprehensible blur, running it through various audio filters on his computer, hoping to strip away the noise and reveal the signal. He was looking for anomalies, for hidden messages, for anything that could give him a foothold into this bizarre reality. He spent an entire night trying to visualize the sound waves, converting them into spectral graphs on his monitor. He watched the green and blue lines dance across the black screen, a chaotic symphony of frequencies. And that's when he saw it. Not in the raw audio, not in the slowed-down playback, but in the visual representation of the sound. Buried within the chaotic peaks and troughs of the static, a faint recurring pattern emerged. It wasn't a word or a symbol he recognized, but a sequence of distinct, almost geometric shapes, appearing briefly, then dissolving back into the noise, only to reappear moments later, subtly shifted, undeniably present. It was like a hidden watermark, a signature embedded within the very fabric of the sound. The shapes were intricate, almost fractal, composed of delicate curves and sharp angles that seemed impossible to generate randomly. And as he stared at the screen, his eyes burning, a new terrifying hypothesis began to form in his mind, chilling him to the bone. What if this wasn't just a broadcast? What if it was a dialogue? What if the changes in the static weren't just random fluctuations but responses? He remembered the old stories about spirits communicating through electronic devices, about EVP, electronic voice phenomena. But this wasn't a ghost whisper. This felt ancient, vast, and utterly alien, yet strangely intelligent. He spent another week, meticulously cross-referencing the visual patterns with the different phases of the static he had identified in his notebook. He discovered that certain visual shapes correlated precisely with the mournful sighs, while others appeared when the rhythm quickened, during the agitated heartbeat phase. It was a syntax, a grammar, a hidden logic he was slowly, painfully beginning to unravel. The realization hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. This wasn't just a language. It was the language. And it was responding to something. But what? And to whom? He had been so focused on deciphering it, he hadn't considered he might be an active participant. He looked around his apartment, suddenly feeling incredibly vulnerable, as if the walls themselves were thinning. The Philco radio, once a comforting relic, now felt like a conduit to something unfathomable, something that had been patiently waiting, listening, and now perhaps responding to his presence, his intense scrutiny, his desperate curiosity. He remembered the way the static had intensified the very first time he turned the radio on, the way it had seemed to focus when he tuned to that specific frequency. Had he not just opened a door, but announced his arrival? Had his own act of discovery been perceived as an invitation? The thought sent a profound shiver down his spine, prickling his skin. He wasn't just an accidental listener. He was part of the circuit now. He was being acknowledged. He stared at the spectrum analyzer on his computer screen, at the faint, recurring geometric shapes within the noise. He zoomed in, enhanced the contrast, and tried to trace the lines, to understand their significance, his fingers trembling on the mouse. Then he noticed something new. A slight distortion, a subtle variation in one of the recurring shapes. It was almost imperceptible, a single pixel out of place, but after weeks of staring at these patterns, David knew it wasn't random. It was a change, a deliberate change, a modification to the established grammar. He replayed the segment of audio, focusing on that specific moment. The static shifted, the sigh grew deeper, more resonant, and then, for a fraction of a second, amidst the hisses and thrums, he heard it. A sound that was utterly distinct, utterly out of place, yet undeniably familiar. It wasn't a word, not in any human language. It was a low, resonant hum, almost like a distant, massive bell tolling, vibrating through the very air of his apartment. But it resonated with a personal familiarity that chilled him to the core, more than any alien sound ever could. It was the same hum he'd heard the night he found the radio in his grandfather's dusty attic, the same hum that had lingered in the air, long after his grandfather had passed away, long after the funeral, long after the house had been emptied. A sound he had dismissed as grief-induced auditory hallucination, a trick of a broken heart. But now it was here, embedded in the static, a signature from beyond. And it was directed at him. The radio wasn't just talking, it was calling. And David, alone in his apartment, lost in the spectral glow of his monitor, had just recognized the voice. It wasn't alien. It was family, or something pretending to be. That name. It hit David with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He ripped the headphones from his ears, the sudden silence of his apartment deafening after the cacophony of the static and that impossible voice. He stared at the old shortwave, its single green light a malevolent eye in the dim room, willing it to stop, to be a trick, a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation and too much caffeine. But the silence didn't last. A faint, almost imperceptible hum still emanated from the radio, a phantom echo of the chaos he just heard. His hands trembled as he slowly, reluctantly, reached for the headphones again. He placed them back over his ears, bracing himself. The static was still there, a churning sea of white noise, but clearer now, sharper somehow. And through it, unmistakably, came the voice again. "David, David, can you hear me?" It was Michael, his younger brother, the one who had vanished without a trace 7 years ago, swallowed by the world just after his 18th birthday. No note, no struggle, just gone. The police had searched, the family had mourned, eventually accepting the grim probability that Michael was either a runaway who didn't want to be found, or worse, a victim of circumstance and forgotten in some cold, dark place. David had never truly accepted it. He'd clung to a desperate, illogical hope, even as years turned into a decade. And now Michael was on his radio, Michael, David whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible even to himself. He knew it was futile to speak into the headphones, but the instinct was overwhelming. Is that really you? The voice in the static seemed to waver, a ghostly sigh. David, it's me. I'm here. In the static. You found me. A cold dread, far deeper than any fear he'd ever known, began to coil in David's gut. This wasn't just a strange radio phenomenon anymore. This was personal. This was impossible. Michael was dead. Or he was somewhere far away, not trapped in the electromagnetic ether of a cheap shortwave radio. Was this a sick joke? A sophisticated prank designed to exploit his deepest grief? But who would know? Who could replicate Michael's voice so perfectly? The slight rasp, the way he elongated certain vowels when he was distressed. David's mind raced, a frantic kaleidoscope of disbelief and a terrifying fragile hope. He had to confirm it. He had to record it. He scrambled for his phone, fumbling with the voice recorder app, then held it clumsily against one of the headphone speakers. The quality would be terrible, but it was all he had. Michael, where are you? David managed to ask, his voice cracking. What happened? How are you doing this? The static surged, momentarily drowning out the voice. Then it returned stronger, more urgent. I don't know, David. It's dark here. Cold. I can only reach out when the signal is right. When the static, it's a language, David. A way through. A language. The phrase echoed in David's mind, mirroring the very title he'd given his obscure blog. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of his apartment. Could it be? Could the very noise he'd been chasing, the chaotic symphony of the airwaves, be a medium for something beyond comprehension? He listened intently, the phone still recording. Michael's voice was still distorted, like a signal struggling to break through interference, but the words were clear enough. He spoke of being lost, of trying to find his way back, of a strange, shimmering light that sometimes appeared in the darkness around him. He spoke of a constant, low hum and the feeling of being watched. I heard you, David, Michael's voice said, a faint tremor in it. I heard your signal. You were looking for me, weren't you? You always were the stubborn one. There was a flicker of their old sibling dynamic in that sentence, a familiar teasing tone, even through the distortion. This convinced David more than anything else. No imposter could know that, could replicate that subtle nuance. This was Michael. A wave of nausea washed over David. His brother was alive, but trapped in some unimaginable, ethereal prison, communicating through static. It was too much. It was insane. He wanted to scream, to cry, to break the radio into 1,000 pieces, but he was paralyzed, held captive by the impossible conversation. How do I get you out? David asked, his voice barely a whisper. What do I do? The static intensified, a whirlwind of sound. Michael's voice became fragmented, urgent. You need to find the true frequency, David. This is just a crack. A whisper. They're listening. You need to be fast. Before they find the way in. The word hung in the air. A new terrifying player in this already impossible game. Who were they? The people who had taken Michael? Or something else entirely? Something related to this static language? David pulled the phone away, ended the recording, his heart hammering against his ribs. He immediately played it back. The sound was rough, muffled by the phone's microphone, but Michael's voice was there, faint but undeniable, especially when he turned up the volume to maximum. The words true frequency and their listening were chillingly clear. He listened again and again, trying to discern every nuance. As he listened, he noticed something peculiar about the static on the recording. It wasn't just random noise. When Michael's voice was present, the static seemed to shift, to pulse in a rhythmic, almost deliberate way. It wasn't just a background hum. It was an integral part of the message, almost like a visual waveform but for sound. It was like the static itself was articulating, breathing alongside the words. He pulled out his notebook, the one filled with his cryptic notes and frequency logs. He started jotting down everything Michael had said, every fragmented clue, every hint of their shared past that had slipped through the static. He drew diagrams, trying to visualize the shifting patterns he thought he heard in the noise. The old transmission tower, Michael's voice had mentioned earlier, before David had even consciously recognized him. Beneath the blinking eye, David remembered an abandoned radio tower on the outskirts of their childhood town, a rusted behemoth that had stood silent for decades. its red warning light long since burned out. But what if it wasn't a physical tower Michael was referring to? What if it was a metaphor? Or a memory? The thought of them gnawed at him. Who were they? Were they the reason Michael was trapped? Were they actively hunting him, trying to prevent him from communicating? The stakes had just been raised exponentially. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a race against an unknown, unseen adversary. Forget sleep. Forget work. Forget everything else. David felt an intense, singular focus take hold. His brother was alive, trapped in some impossible dimension, reaching out through the very phenomenon David had dedicated himself to understanding. The static wasn't just a language. It was Michael's desperate cry for help. He needed to find that true frequency. He needed to understand the language of the static, not just as an intellectual pursuit, but as a key to unlock his brother's prison. He looked at the shortwave radio, no longer just a piece of equipment, but a lifeline, a portal, a horrifying beacon. The green light on the radio seemed to intensify, burning into his vision. David leaned forward, his face inches from the dial, his finger hovering over the tuning knob. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his life and perhaps Michael's now depended on what he would discover in the depths of that endless speaking static. He was no longer just an observer. He was a participant, and the game had only just begun. The realization hit David with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. He wasn't just investigating a friend's obsession. He was now entangled in the very fabric of it. The static, the numbers, the chilling sense of being watched. It wasn't just Michael's world anymore. It was his. A cold, hard knot formed in his stomach, a mix of pure terror and a strange, exhilarating rush of adrenaline. Michael was gone, and David was left holding the pieces of a puzzle that now threatened to consume him whole. He looked around Michael's study, his gaze sweeping over the familiar chaos that now seemed imbued with a sinister new meaning. The stacks of journals, the intricate diagrams, the maps tacked to the wall. They weren't just clues to Michael's descent, they were instructions. A twisted treasure map where the treasure might be his own survival. He moved to the desk, his hands trembling slightly as he picked up one of Michael's heavily annotated journals. Before he'd skimmed them looking for explanations. Now he was looking for a manual. He flipped through pages filled with dense, hurried script, cross-referenced with symbols he didn't recognize. Michael's handwriting, usually so precise, had grown jagged, frantic. David focused on the most recent entries, the ones from the weeks leading up to Michael's disappearance. There, buried amidst calculations and cryptic notes about resonant frequencies and phase shifts, David found a recurring symbol. A small, inverted triangle with a single at its center. He'd seen it before, tucked away in the margins, dismissing it as a doodle. Now it stood out, a beacon in the storm of Michael's madness. He scanned for more instances of the symbol. It appeared next to certain frequencies, next to specific dates, and sometimes next to what looked like coordinates. But what truly sent a shiver down his spine was finding it repeatedly next to Michael's own name. And then, impossibly, next to his. David Miller. His full name scrawled in Michael's hand, followed by that same inverted triangle. Michael hadn't just been observing. He had been preparing. Preparing David. A sudden sharp burst of static from the radio made him jump. He spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. The radio, still tuned to that abyssal frequency, seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was a presence. He felt its gaze, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He walked cautiously towards it, his eyes scanning the dials, the wires, the small custom-built modifications Michael had added. He remembered Michael's obsession with finding patterns in the chaos, of extracting meaning from the seemingly random. What if the static wasn't random at all? What if it was a deliberate, complex cipher? And what if the inverted triangle was the key? David picked up another journal, a smaller, leather-bound one that seemed less like a scientific record and more like a personal diary. He hadn't touched this one before, respecting Michael's privacy. But privacy was a luxury he couldn't afford now. He opened it to a page marked with a dried, pressed four-leaf clover. Michael had always been superstitious in a quiet, unassuming way. The page was filled with what looked like a personal code, not numbers but a series of seemingly random words, interspersed with the inverted triangle symbol. He began to read aloud, slowly, hesitantly. Whisper, breath, shadow, listen, echo, signal, threshold. Each word was separated by the symbol. He flipped to the next page. He unlocked frequency, sequence, observe, participate. It was a lexicon, a glossary of terms, each assigned a specific meaning within Michael's system. David's mind raced. Michael wasn't just recording observations, he was building a language or perhaps decoding one that already existed. As he continued to read, a pattern emerged. The words weren't random. They seemed to be descriptors, actions, or states of being related to perception and communication. He found a section titled The Receiver's Guide, and his breath hitched. This was it. This was the manual Michael had left for him. It was written in a more direct, almost instructional tone. David, it began, in handwriting that was far steadier than the other journals, like Michael had consciously composed himself for this entry. If you are reading this, I am gone, and you have found the signal. You have heard the calling. Do not fear. Or rather fear, but do not let it paralyze you. The static is not just noise. It is a language, yes, but more than that, it is a living entity. It seeks to communicate. It seeks to recruit. David's blood ran cold. Recruit. The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Michael continued, there are others. Many others. They are the listeners, the receivers. Some embrace it, some fight it, some simply disappear. I have been fighting it, David, trying to understand its rules, its purpose. But it has always been one step ahead. It knows what we think, what we feel. It adapts. And now it has chosen you. A profound sense of dread washed over David. This wasn't just some abstract scientific puzzle. It was a sentient, unseen force playing a game with human lives. The inverted triangle, Michael's journal explained, is the mark of a chosen participant. It is a sign that the static has acknowledged you. It is a call to action. You will find that certain frequencies, certain patterns of static, now resonate differently for you. Listen closely. The language is not spoken in words but in nuances. In the rhythm, the intensity, the subtle shifts in tone. It is a dance of absence and presence, of silence and sound. David looked at the radio, then back at the journal. To begin your participation, Michael had written, you must acknowledge the call. Tune to the frequency 88.8 MHz at precisely 3 a.m. This is the threshold frequency. It is where the veil between our world and theirs is thinnest. He checked his watch. It was just past 2 a.m. An hour. He had an hour to mentally prepare himself for whatever lay beyond that threshold frequency. You will hear a specific pattern, the journal continued, a sequence of 3 distinct bursts of static, each followed by a brief, almost imperceptible silence. This is the initiation sequence. Once you hear it, you must respond. Respond? How? Your response, Michael's words seemed to whisper from the page, must be a thought, a clear, focused intention. Do not speak aloud. Here's your mind. Project your will. Project your question, and it will answer. But be warned, David. The answers are rarely straightforward. They are riddles, challenges, sometimes even warnings. David felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Michael wasn't just a brilliant scientist. He was a pioneer on the edge of an unknown, terrifying frontier. And now David was being forced to follow. He continued reading, desperate for any more guidance. I have left you a filter, a device I built to help focus the static, to cut through the noise and reveal the underlying patterns. It is hidden behind the loose brick in the fireplace, beneath the mantelpiece. You will need it. Without it, the static will overwhelm you. It will consume your thoughts, plant seeds of doubt, and twist your perception until you no longer know what is real. David immediately moved to the fireplace, his hands fumbling along the brickwork. He found the loose brick, just as Michael had described, and pulled it out. Behind it, nestled in the dark cavity, was a small, intricately wired device. It was a handheld receiver, no larger than a smartphone, with a small glowing green display and a single unmarked dial. It felt heavy, cold, and strangely alive in his hand. He brought it back to the desk, examining its craftsmanship. It was undeniably Michael's work, precise, elegant, and utterly alien. He plugged it into the radio's auxiliary port, following a diagram Michael had sketched in the journal. As he connected it, the green display flickered to life, showing a series of pulsating waveforms that seemed to mimic the erratic bursts of static from the radio. The journal had one last chilling instruction for this stage. Once the filter is active, and you have tuned to 88, 8 megahertz at the appointed time, wait for the initiation sequence. When it comes, project your first question. But David, choose wisely. Your first question sets the tone. It reveals your intent. And the static it watches. It judges. My first question was, what are you? And the answer nearly drove me mad. I advise you to be more specific, more personal. Ask something that matters to you, that truly drives you. Because from that moment on, you are bound. You are a player in the game. And the game does not end until you either win or you are claimed. David stared at the journal, at Michael's final desperate plea for understanding, for a legacy beyond his disappearance. Michael had been trying to beat this thing, to map its rules, to perhaps even find a way to escape its grasp. And now that burden, that terrifying quest, had fallen to David. He looked at the clock again.
2:45 a.m.
15 minutes. 15 minutes until he stepped across the threshold, into a world he never knew existed. A world where the very air vibrated with a hidden language, and where the static on the radio was not just noise but a voice. A voice waiting to speak to him, to challenge him, to perhaps even claim him, just as it had claimed Michael. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the weight of his friend's fate, and his own pressing down on him. The game was about to begin, and David Miller was about to become a participant. The air in David's apartment felt thin, suffocating, as if all the oxygen had been replaced by the chilling echo of his own thoughts. Michael was gone, not just missing but claimed. The word, whispered by some dark corner of his mind, resonated with a terrible finality, and the entity, whatever it was, that had pulled Michael into its silent maw, now had its eyes on David. He was a participant. The game had begun. But what game? A hunt? A test? A twisted invitation to madness? David, an engineer by trade, a man of logic and reason, felt the foundations of his world crumbling beneath him. Yet amidst the terror, a fierce resolve ignited. He couldn't just stand by. He couldn't let Michael vanish without a trace, without an answer. He owed it to his friend, and perhaps he owed it to himself, to understand the static, to decipher its chilling language. His first step, he knew, had to be Michael's apartment. The police had been through it, of course, searching for clues, for any sign of struggle or forced entry. They had found nothing. They chalked it up to a voluntary disappearance, or perhaps something more sinister, but always within the realm of human explanation. They hadn't heard the static. They hadn't felt its pull. David managed to secure access a few days later, explaining to the building manager that he was helping Michael's distraught parents collect some of his belongings. The landlord, a harried woman named Brenda, eyed him with a mixture of pity and suspicion. She handed him a spare key, warning him not to disturb anything further than necessary, as the police might still want to revisit the scene. David nodded, feigning grief, his mind entirely focused on one thing: the radio. Stepping into Michael's apartment was like entering a mausoleum. The air was stagnant, heavy with the ghost of a life abruptly interrupted. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the drawn blinds, illuminating the unsettling stillness. Michael's half-eaten bowl of cereal still sat on the kitchen counter, a grim relic of his last known moment of normalcy. Clothes lay draped over a chair, a book marked with a forgotten page. It was all so utterly, tragically ordinary, making the extraordinary nature of his disappearance even more horrifying. David's gaze swept the room, ignoring the mundane, searching for the anomaly. He found it in the living room, tucked away in a corner, almost hidden behind a stack of vinyl records. Michael's shortwave radio. It wasn't the same model David had seen in Michael's garage. That one was a clunky, old military surplus unit Michael used for his amateur radio hobby. This one was sleeker, a more modern, almost professional grade receiver, with an array of dials, meters, and a digital display that was currently dark. It looked expensive, complicated, and utterly out of place in Michael's otherwise modest apartment. A shiver traced its way down David's spine as he approached it. The radio sat on a small, wobbly table, flanked by a stack of notebooks filled with Michael's frantic, spidery handwriting. David picked up the top notebook. It was dense with frequency notations, signal strengths, and cryptic symbols that looked like a madman's code. He recognized some of the technical terms, but the overall impression was one of obsession, a descent into an unknown language. He carefully unplugged the radio, wrapping the antenna wire around its base. It felt cold, unnervingly so, as if it had been sitting in a freezer. He knew he couldn't experiment with it here. He needed his own equipment, his own controlled environment. He needed to analyze it, dissect it, understand its every function. He carefully gathered the radio and the stack of notebooks, feeling a profound sense of trespass, but also an undeniable pull of destiny. He was now irrevocably walking in Michael's footsteps. Back in his own apartment, in the makeshift lab he'd set up in his spare room, David laid out Michael's radio and notebooks. The air here was buzzing with a different kind of energy, the hum of his own computers, the faint glow of monitors, the quiet whir of analytical instruments. This was his domain where logic reigned. He hoped it would be enough to combat whatever illogical force he was about to unleash. He began by meticulously examining the radio, powering it up. The digital display flickered to life, showing a frequency, 13.785 MHz. David recognized it as part of the shortwave band, often used for international broadcasting or amateur radio. But the static that emanated from the speaker wasn't the usual white noise. It was different. It wasn't just random hiss. It had a texture, a rhythm. It pulsed, almost imperceptibly, a subtle ebb and flow beneath the surface cacophony. David connected the radio to his professional audio interface, feeding the signal directly into his computer. He opened his advanced spectral analysis software, a tool he usually reserved for complex sound design projects or acoustic engineering. The waveform on his screen was mesmerizing, terrifying. It wasn't flat, random noise. There were peaks and troughs, repeating patterns that suggested structure, intent. It was like looking at a highly complex, yet distorted musical score. David adjusted the filters, isolating specific frequency bands, trying to strip away the environmental noise to get to the core of what Michael had been hearing. As he filtered, as he processed, something began to emerge. A faint underlying hum. Not a single tone, but a series of rapidly shifting microfrequencies, too quick for the human ear to consciously process as distinct notes, but forming an undeniable rhythmic foundation. It was like a hidden heartbeat within the static. David leaned closer to the speakers, his breath catching in his throat. He put on his studio headphones, isolating himself further, immersing himself in the sound. The static intensified, seeming to swell and recede with his own breathing. And then he heard them. Whispers. Not words, not distinct sentences, but a sensation of voices, myriad and faint, just beneath the threshold of audibility. They rose and fell, like a distant choir singing through a thick fog. It was disorienting, unsettling, like trying to catch smoke. He couldn't make out a single syllable, yet the presence of communication was undeniable. It was a language, yes, but one spoken by ghosts or entities beyond human comprehension. He frantically paused the recording, rewound, and played it again. The whispers were still there, elusive and chilling. He tried to enhance them, to bring them forward, but they resisted, dissolving back into the static the moment he pushed too hard. It was as if they existed only on the very edge of perception, designed to be heard but not understood, to drive one to the brink of madness in the pursuit of meaning. Returning to the visual analysis, David focused on the repeating patterns. He zoomed in, slowed down the playback, and used algorithms designed to detect non-random sequences. And there it was. A complex series of modulations, a specific sequence of frequency shifts, repeating every 11.3 seconds. It was too intricate, too precise to be natural interference. It was artificial. It was a signal. He isolated the sequence, extracting it from the surrounding noise. He ran it through various decoding programs, trying to treat it like a digital data stream. Nothing. It wasn't ASCII, it wasn't Morse code, it wasn't any known form of human communication protocol. But it was a pattern. A very distinct, very intentional pattern. David looked at Michael's notebooks. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the frantic scribbles, the mathematical equations, the strange symbols. And then he saw it. A series of drawings, almost like circuit diagrams, but with odd, non-standard components. And next to them, a sequence of numbers and symbols that mirrored the pattern he had just extracted from the static. Michael had found it. He had recognized the pattern. He had started to decode it. David's hands trembled as he cross-referenced Michael's notes with his own analysis. Michael hadn't just been listening to the static. He had been interpreting it. And the symbols, the strange diagrams, weren't just random doodles. They were a key. Working through the night, fueled by adrenaline and a growing sense of dread, David began to piece together Michael's work. The symbols, when applied to the extracted static pattern, didn't form words, but something far more abstract, yet undeniably meaningful. They formed a series of coordinates, latitude and longitude, a specific location. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just a language, it was a map, a set of instructions, the whispers, the patterns, the static itself. It was all a breadcrumb trail, laid out for Michael and now for him. The game wasn't about understanding the static in an academic sense. It was about following it. It was about going to the places it pointed to. He traced the coordinates on his digital map. They led to a remote, almost forgotten corner of the state, deep within a national forest, far from any established roads or towns. An abandoned fire watchtower, according to the topographical maps. An isolated, desolate place, perfect for a rendezvous with the unknown. David stared at the glowing coordinates on his screen, the static still hissing softly from the radio, a constant, low thrum beneath his awareness. He was terrified. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to stop, to call the police, to run as far away as possible. But the image of Michael, his friend, swallowed by this same mystery, held him fast. He was a participant now. The static had spoken, and it had given him a destination. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had to go. The game was about to enter its next terrifying phase, and David Miller was about to step directly into the heart of the enigma. The coordinates glowed on his phone screen, a cold digital beacon pointing him northeast, deep into the sprawling, forgotten forests of the Blackwood National Preserve. David stared at the string of numbers, then back at the radio, its single green light a malevolent eye in the dimness of his makeshift lab. The voice, or whatever it was, had been precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. This wasn't a suggestion, it was an imperative. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach, but beneath it, a strange, almost manic excitement bubbled. He was afraid, yes, but also utterly captivated. This was it. The next step, the answer, or at least a clue, was waiting for him in the heart of that wilderness. He felt like a puppet on an invisible string, pulled by a force he couldn't comprehend but found impossible to resist. He spent the next few hours in a methodical, almost robotic frenzy of preparation. A heavy-duty backpack, once meant for weekend camping trips, now held a different kind of survival gear. A powerful flashlight, extra batteries, a first aid kit, a multi-tool. He packed a small, portable shortwave radio, hoping to replicate the conditions, to perhaps catch another message, though he knew deep down it wouldn't be that simple. He even grabbed the old, battered Walkman from his desk, the one he'd used for recording the initial static. A strange impulse perhaps, but it felt important. His mind raced, replaying every cryptic message, every burst of intelligent static. Was he walking into a trap? Was this some elaborate prank, a psychological experiment designed to break him? The thought chilled him, but the alternative, that a disembodied intelligence was trying to communicate, was even more terrifying and infinitely more compelling. He thought of Jessica, of Michael, of the dismissive looks they'd given his theories. He had to prove them wrong. He had to prove himself right. The drive was long, stretching into the early hours of the morning. The familiar hum of his SUV was a comforting counterpoint to the buzzing anxiety in his head. He watched the cityscape slowly give way to suburbs, then small towns, and finally endless stretches of dark, whispering trees. The air grew colder, heavier, as he ventured deeper into the preserve. The GPS signal wavered, then completely died, swallowed by the dense canopy and the sheer remoteness of the area. He was forced to rely on a tattered paper map he'd picked up at a gas station, tracing the winding, unmarked logging roads that veered off the main highway. The road itself became a challenge, deteriorating into a muddy, rutted track that barely deserved the name. Branches scraped against the sides of his SUV, the sound a grating symphony of protest. He drove past rusted-out logging equipment, skeletal remains of forgotten industries, and signs of human presence that had long since been reclaimed by the forest. The preserve was vast, ancient, and seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Finally, as the first faint glimmer of dawn began to paint the eastern sky in hues of bruised purple and gray, he reached the end of the drivable path. A barricade of fallen trees, long since rotted and moss-covered, blocked the way. Beyond it, a faint, overgrown trail snaked deeper into the woods, just as the map had indicated. This was it. The coordinates were now only a short hike away. He parked the SUV, tucking it as far off the track as possible, hoping it would remain unnoticed. The air was frigid, damp with dew, and carried the scent of pine needles and decaying leaves. A profound silence enveloped him, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the unseen breeze and the distant hoot of an owl. He pulled his backpack tighter, took a deep breath and stepped onto the trail. The path was barely discernible, choked with thorny bushes and fallen branches. David pushed through, his boots sinking into the soft, yielding earth. The forest here felt different, denser, older. The trees seemed to lean in, their ancient branches forming a tangled, oppressive canopy that blocked out the nascent light. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. His imagination, usually his greatest asset, was now his greatest tormentor, conjuring unseen eyes, lurking shadows, and the chilling possibility that he wasn't alone. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only an hour, the trees began to thin slightly. Through a gap in the foliage he saw it. It wasn't a house or a bunker or a lighthouse. It was a complex, a collection of low-slung concrete buildings, their brutalist architecture softened by decades of neglect. Rust-streaked metal siding peeled from the walls, windows were shattered or boarded up, and a dense tangle of ivy and weeds had begun to reclaim the structures, pulling them back into the earth. A rusted, chain-link fence, partially collapsed, surrounded the perimeter, topped with coils of barbed wire that now served only as perches for birds. A faded, almost illegible sign, half hidden by overgrown bushes, read, "Blackwood Research Facility, authorized personnel only." David felt a cold dread seep into his bones, even colder than the morning air. A research facility? What kind of research? The isolation, the decay, the ominous silence. It all screamed of secrets buried and forgotten. The radio had led him here specifically. He checked his phone again, though the GPS was still dead. He pulled out the printout of the coordinates, double-checking the numbers against the position of the facility. This was it. He was here. He found a gap in the fence, where rust had eaten through the wire, creating an easy entry point. Stepping onto the grounds, the crunch of dry leaves and fallen debris beneath his boots echoed unnaturally loud in the profound silence. The air here was heavy, stagnant, carrying a faint metallic tang. He looked around. Several buildings stood in various states of disrepair. One, larger than the others, had a collapsed section of roof, exposing its skeletal interior to the sky. He approached the nearest building, a smaller structure with a single heavy metal door hanging askew on its hinges. He pushed it open carefully, the groan of protesting metal a jarring sound. Inside it was pitch black. He switched on his powerful flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom, revealing a scene of utter dereliction. Dust motes danced in the light thick as fog. Desks were overturned, chairs lay shattered, and papers, yellowed and brittle with age, were scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. This building appeared to have been an administrative office, or perhaps a reception area. On one wall, a corkboard still held a few faded notices, their ink long since bled into illegibility. He moved deeper, his flashlight beam sweeping across the debris. He found a broken coffee mug, a forgotten pen, a single tarnished nameplate lying face down in the dust. He picked it up, careful not to disturb the decades of grime. He wiped it with his sleeve. The name etched into the metal was surprisingly clear. Dr. Alara Vance, lead theoretical physicist. A theoretical physicist? Here, in the middle of nowhere? The name sent a shiver down his spine. It felt too specific, too important to be a coincidence. He pocketed the nameplate, a tangible piece of this forgotten puzzle. He moved on, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He entered another room, larger this time, with what looked like control panels and banks of ruined machinery. Wires dangled like dead vines, screens were cracked, and gauges were frozen at impossible readings. It was clearly a laboratory or a control room for something significant. Then he saw it. In the center of the room, on a large, sturdy table, stood a metal box. It was about 2 feet square, made of dark, unblemished steel, looking utterly out of place amidst the surrounding decay. It was clean, almost pristine, as if it had been placed there yesterday. No dust, no rust, no sign of age. It pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible hum that David felt more than heard, a low vibration that resonated in his chest. He approached it slowly, his flashlight beam fixed on the anomaly. As he drew closer, he realized the box wasn't entirely plain. On its top surface, etched with incredible precision, was a symbol, a complex geometric pattern of interlocking circles and lines, radiating outwards from a central point. It was alien yet familiar, like something he had seen in a dream he couldn't quite recall. And then he heard it. A faint, almost inaudible crackle. It wasn't coming from his portable radio, which was still in his backpack. It wasn't the sound of the wind or the settling of the old building. It was coming from the box. A whisper of static, so faint it could have been his imagination, but undeniably present. It was the same static, the same signature. He leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. The hum intensified, a low thrum that vibrated through the metal box and into his fingertips as he tentatively reached out. The static grew louder, a soft hiss that seemed to emanate from within the box itself. It was speaking, or rather it was breathing. He noticed a small, almost invisible seam running along one side of the box, a latch cleverly concealed. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew with a certainty that transcended logic that this was the next step. This was what the radio had led him to. This was the heart of the enigma. With trembling fingers, David reached for the latch. The static pulsed, a silent invitation, a warning, a promise. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to flee this place of forgotten horrors and impossible signals. But a deeper, more primal urge, the insatiable hunger for truth, compelled him forward. He clicked the latch open. The box gave a soft, almost ethereal sigh as the lid slowly, silently began to lift. A faint internal light, a pale blue glow spilled out from within, illuminating the dust-filled air around it. David peered inside, his mind reeling, preparing himself for anything. He was about to confront the source, the sender, the impossible answer to the impossible question that had consumed his life. And as the lid fully opened, revealing its contents, the static surged, finally coalescing into something more. A hum, a tone, a language. And David saw what lay within. It wasn't a relic of human design, not in any sense he understood. Nestled within the velvet lining of the box was an object roughly the size of a human skull, yet utterly alien. Its surface was a mosaic of interlocking, obsidian-like plates, each catching the dim light of the garage and refracting it into fleeting deep violet hues. There were no visible seams, no power cords, no buttons or switches. It was a singular, seamless entity, yet it throbbed with an internal light, a soft, rhythmic pulse that emanated from beneath the dark plates, making the entire object seem alive. Intricate, glowing lines like veins of pure energy traced patterns across its surface, patterns that pulsed in sync with the light. It wasn't cold to the touch, nor warm, but possessed a strange, almost organic temperature, as if it were a living thing in dormant suspension. The static, which had reached a fever pitch as the lid opened, now transformed. It didn't diminish, but rather coalesced, sharpening into something profoundly structured. It was no longer the chaotic hiss of a broken signal, but a complex tapestry of overlapping frequencies, a symphony of tones and vibrations. Each pulse from the object in the box seemed to correspond to a specific surge in this auditory tapestry. It was a language undeniable and overwhelming, not spoken words, but a cascade of pure information washing over him, resonating not just in his ears, but deep within his bones, vibrating through the very air of the garage. A strange, almost magnetic pull emanated from the object. David felt a primal urge to reach out, to touch it, to understand. His hand, as if guided by an unseen force, extended slowly, trembling towards the pulsating enigma. His fingertips brushed against its surface. The moment of contact was like a bolt of lightning, but without pain. Instead, it was an explosion of sensory input. The humming language intensified, no longer just sound, but a multidimensional experience. Images erupted in his mind's eye, not as hallucinations, but as direct transmissions, vivid and undeniably real. Simultaneously, the intricate lines on the object's surface flared, projecting a faint, shimmering light onto the garage wall, revealing abstract symbols that shifted and reformed with bewildering speed. David gasped, stumbling back a step, overwhelmed. The images in his head were a torrent, swirling nebulae of impossible colors, vast geometric structures drifting through the void, then a colossal, blinding flash of energy, an event of cosmic proportions. He saw a planet, not Earth, but one teeming with what looked like intricate, crystalline cities, suddenly engulfed, shattered by a wave of pure, destructive force. The wave wasn't fire, but a ripple of distorted space and time, leaving behind only echoes, shadows, and a vast silent emptiness. He understood, intimately, terrifyingly, that he was witnessing a cataclysm, an ancient, universal catastrophe, and the static, the endless, pervasive static he had chased his entire life, was not just background noise. It was the residual energy of that event. It was the echo of that destructive ripple, a persistent scar on the fabric of reality, a constant broken broadcast of a moment that had ripped through the cosmos. This object, this impossible device, was not merely a receiver. It was a translator. It was taking the chaotic whispers of a dying universe and rendering them into a coherent, if still alien, narrative. The language, once an enigma, now felt like a lament, a dirge for something lost beyond imagining. It wasn't just a recording. It felt like a live broadcast from the past, an urgent warning playing on an endless loop. The tone shifted, becoming more agitated, more insistent. The projected symbols on the wall coalesced into what looked like astronomical charts, then diagrams of impossible physics, all flowing into a narrative of profound loss and impending dread. David's mind raced, struggling to reconcile what he was seeing and hearing with everything he knew. This wasn't a hoax. This wasn't a dream. This was real. And it was far, far bigger than any conspiracy theory, any government secret. This was a message from the stars, a ghost from the cosmic past, delivered directly to his grandfather's hidden workshop, now to him. His grandfather, of course. The frantic notes, the cryptic calculations, the decades of obsession. He hadn't been mad. He had been listening. He had been trying to find this. This device, this impossible machine, was the missing piece of his grandfather's life's work. He must have built the radio, the amplifiers, the filters, all in an attempt to capture and clarify the signal, to find the source. And somehow he had succeeded, or at least gotten close enough for the signal to lead David to this. The weight of the revelation settled on David like a physical burden. He was holding something that shouldn't exist, something that redefined humanity's place in the universe. We weren't alone. We were part of a larger, more violent, more ancient story. And a piece of that story, a warning, was now in his hands. The images inside his head intensified. The symbols on the wall began to depict not just a past event, but a series of calculations, trajectories, and a timeline. The cataclysmic event wasn't just a historical record. It was a precursor. The language shifted again, the tones growing sharper, more urgent, conveying a sense of immediacy. The message wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what was going to happen. A cold dread, unlike anything he had ever known, washed over him. He wasn't just observing a cosmic calamity. He was being warned about a recurrence, or perhaps, an impending consequence of that ancient event. The static, the universal hum, was not just the echo of a distant past, but a persistent, growing tremor in the present. He saw patterns that resembled celestial alignments, energy signatures, and then, alarmingly, a depiction of Earth, fragile and vulnerable, caught in the path of something vast and indifferent. The device wasn't just playing a recording. It was interpreting the continuous, live data stream of the universe, and that data stream was screaming a warning. David felt an intense, crushing isolation. Who could he tell? How could he explain this? A pulsating alien artifact, hidden in his grandfather's garage, translating cosmic static into images of planetary destruction and an impending threat? They would lock him away. They would dismiss him as insane. Yet the evidence was undeniable, resonating in every fiber of his being. The symbols projected on the wall began to form a sequence, a pattern that seemed to be an instruction, a set of coordinates, or perhaps a key. Amidst the overwhelming sense of doom, there was a faint flicker of possibility, a suggestion of a path, a solution, or at least a next step. The device wasn't just a passive recorder of tragedy. It was an active instrument, designed to convey information and perhaps to guide. He had to listen. He had to understand. The world he lived in, the quiet, mundane existence he had carved out, felt impossibly small and insignificant now. He was no longer just chasing a ghost. He was face to face with a revelation that transcended humanity itself. And the impossible answer to the impossible question had just delivered a message that could change everything. He tightened his grip on the strange, pulsating object. He had to decipher the full message. He must listen. He must listen. The object in his hands pulsed with a rhythm that was no longer just physical, but deeply resonant within his own skull. It wasn't a vibration against his skin, it was a thrumming inside him, a subtle, insistent pressure behind his eyes, at the base of his brain. The low hum, previously just a sound, now seemed to twist itself into something more. It wasn't a frequency he could tune, but a raw, unfiltered stream of information that bypassed his ears entirely and flowed directly into his consciousness. He closed his eyes, his grip tightening until his knuckles blanched. The world outside, the dim light of his lab, the hum of his servers, the distant city drone, faded into an irrelevant periphery. All that remained was the object, its inexplicable warmth, and the torrent of data it was pouring into his mind. It wasn't a language of words, not as humans understood them. It was a language of pure concept, a deluge of sensory input untethered from human experience. He saw colors that didn't exist in our spectrum, felt emotions that had no names, heard harmonies composed of frequencies that would shatter human eardrums. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose of cosmic truth, every atom of his being overwhelmed by the sheer volume and alien nature of the input. For a moment, panic seized him. His mind, trained in logic and order, recoiled from the chaos. His brain screamed in protest, threatening to short-circuit under the impossible load. He felt a primal fear, the kind that whispers of insignificance when confronted with the truly vast. But then the years of obsessive dedication, the countless hours spent sifting through digital noise, the inherent wiring of his unique mind kicked in. He didn't try to understand it all at once. He didn't try to translate. He simply observed. He let the data wash over him, a patient digital monk meditating on an impossible scripture. He looked for patterns. He looked for repetition. He looked for the underlying structure within the apparent pandemonium. And slowly, agonizingly, patterns began to emerge. Not logical patterns, not mathematical sequences he could easily graph, but something more akin to a universal syntax, a grammar of existence itself. The static wasn't random at all. It was a dense, layered communication. Within the cacophony, he began to discern distinct voices. Not literal voices, but streams of information carrying different thematic weights. One stream pulsed with what felt like immense ancient knowledge. Another throbbed with a profound sense of urgency, almost a warning. A third was pure, unadulterated imagery, visions of structures that defied physics, landscapes that belonged in fever dreams, and beings that were more energy than matter. He focused on the imagery first. It was the most accessible. He saw colossal, crystalline spires piercing nebulae, cities built from pure light, and vast interstellar networks that hummed with purpose. These weren't alien civilizations in the conventional sense. They were something far older, far more fundamental. They seemed to exist within the fabric of space-time, not merely on planets or stars. They were architects of reality, not just inhabitants. Then came the emotional resonance. A wave of profound loneliness washed over him, followed by an equally intense sense of interconnectedness. It was the feeling of being utterly alone in an infinite void, yet simultaneously a crucial, tiny part of an incomprehensibly vast living tapestry. The message wasn't just about what they were, it was about what we are, relative to them. As he delved deeper, the object seemed to respond, its pulses growing more insistent, its internal light, previously a faint glow, now brightening to a steady, ethereal luminescence. It was as if his understanding was fueling its transmission, or perhaps unlocking deeper layers of its purpose. He realized the object wasn't just a receiver. It was a translator, a bridge. It was taking something utterly alien and rendering it into a form his brain, however strained, could begin to process. It was a key, but a key to a lock that existed not in space but in consciousness itself. And then the warning stream intensified. It was a feeling more than a concept. A sense of impending dissolution, of something ancient stirring, something that had been dormant but was now close to awakening. It wasn't a threat from an external invader. It was a threat from an internal imbalance, a fundamental flaw in the cosmic design. The message conveyed that the universe, as sentient beings perceived it, was a delicate construct, a carefully balanced symphony of frequencies and vibrations. And something was disrupting that harmony. The static he had been hearing his entire life, the background noise of existence that he had always instinctively known was more than just random, was not just a language. It was the sound of that disruption. It was the hum of a failing system, a dying star, a tearing fabric. The source of the message wasn't a planet or a star system. It was a collective consciousness, an ancient intelligence that existed across countless dimensions, a network of observers who had witnessed the universe unfold from its very genesis. They were the silent watchers, the cosmic librarians, and they were in distress. Their message, channeled through the pulsating object, was a desperate plea, a final warning. The disruption was spreading. It manifested as anomalies, as impossible events, as the subtle unraveling of reality at its seams. And humanity, unknowingly, was at a critical juncture. He saw flashes of distorted timelines, glimpses of alternate realities where the disruption had already consumed everything. He felt the echo of countless civilizations that had perished, not from war or disease, but from the fundamental fabric of their existence simply ceasing to be. The object vibrated violently in his hands, its light flaring. He felt a surge of energy, excruciatingly painful yet exhilarating, course through his body. His vision blurred. His ears rang with a sound that was both deafening and utterly silent. He was being shown the truth, not through metaphor or analogy, but directly, viscerally. The static on the radio was the background radiation of a universe under siege. It was the white noise of a reality struggling to maintain its coherence. And the object he held, this impossible piece of technology, was designed by these ancient watchers to find and activate a counterfrequency, a harmonic resonance that could stabilize the cosmic symphony. But there was a catch, a terrifying revelation that made his blood run cold. The counterfrequency wasn't something external to be found. It wasn't a signal to be broadcast. It was inherent. It was within certain beings. And then the final horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The message wasn't just a warning. It was an activation sequence. The object wasn't just a key, it was a trigger. And the beings capable of emitting this counterfrequency, of restoring the cosmic balance, they were not just rare. They were unique. His own mind, his unique neurological makeup, his lifelong obsession with patterns and noise, his ability to hear the static as a language. It wasn't a coincidence. He wasn't just deciphering the message. He was the message. He was the intended recipient, the conduit. The object pulsed one last, blinding time, and then settled into a steady, powerful thrum. The torrent of information ceased, replaced by a single, clear, undeniable directive echoing in the deepest chambers of his mind. He knew what he had to do. He knew his true purpose. And he knew the immense, terrifying cost. The static was a language, and it had just told him that he was not only meant to speak it, but to become it. The disruption wasn't coming. It was already here. And he was the only one who could stop it. The object in his hands was not just communicating. It was initiating his transformation. The metal in his grasp, once cold and inert, now thrummed with a living heat that spread like wildfire through his palms, up his arms, and into the very core of his being. It wasn't a physical flame, but an electrical current of pure information, a torrent of data that bypassed his ears, his eyes, his conscious thought, and surged directly into his nervous system. His muscles spasmed, his teeth clenched, but there was no pain, only an overwhelming, all-encompassing presence. The world around Michael blurred, then sharpened with an impossible clarity. The faint hum of the fluorescent light above, the distant drone of traffic, the subtle creak of the old house. They didn't just register as sounds anymore. They were intricate, layered frequencies, each a distinct voice in a vast, silent chorus. He could feel the electromagnetic waves from the Wi-Fi router, the faint signals from satellites orbiting miles above, the microscopic vibrations of dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. Everything was a transmission, a constant, unbroken stream of data. And at the heart of it all, that familiar, omnipresent static. It wasn't just noise. It was the foundation, the carrier wave, the fundamental language of existence itself. Purer than any spoken word, more complex than any written script. It was the raw, unfiltered truth of the universe, constantly communicating its own being. He had heard it before, but now he understood it. He wasn't just listening. He was becoming a part of the broadcast. His mind felt like a vast, suddenly open chamber, flooded with light and sound and incomprehensible meaning. Memories, fears, aspirations, his entire identity began to dissolve, not vanishing, but becoming interwoven with this new, immense consciousness. He was still Michael, but Michael was also becoming a frequency, a living conduit. The object in his hands was no longer a separate entity. It was an extension of his own flesh, its intricate circuits now mirroring the pathways of his own synapses. He felt the subtle shift in his cellular structure, a low hum resonating beneath his skin, a vibration that felt both alien and profoundly familiar, like finally remembering a forgotten rhythm of his own pulse. And with this terrifying, exhilarating expansion of self, came the understanding of the disruption. It wasn't a coming event, a future catastrophe waiting to unfold. It was already here, a parasitic frequency, a rogue signal woven into the very fabric of the static he was now becoming. Imagine a flawless symphony, suddenly plagued by a barely perceptible, discordant note that slowly, insidiously, began to corrupt every other instrument. That was the disruption. It wasn't an explosion or a sudden collapse. It was an insidious decay, a gradual unraveling of the informational threads that held reality together. It started small, a momentary glitch in a digital display, a word forgotten mid-sentence, a flicker in the perception of time. But these were merely symptoms, surface manifestations of a deeper, more fundamental attack. This anti-language, this malevolent static, was designed to overwrite the true language, to replace order with a calculated chaos, to sever the connections that allowed the universe to communicate with itself. Michael saw it now, not with his eyes, but with this newly awakened sense. He saw the subtle distortions in the electromagnetic field, felt the faint, wrong frequencies humming beneath the normal hum of power lines. He perceived the places where the true static was being drowned out, where its signal was weakening, allowing the invasive noise to seep in and corrupt the underlying data stream of existence. The world wasn't breaking. It was being meticulously, systematically rewritten. The old man's words echoed in his newly expanded mind, no longer riddles but stark warnings. The disruption wasn't coming. It was already here. And he was the only one who could stop it. Michael understood why. He was becoming the language itself. He wasn't just a receiver. He was meant to be a modulator, a counter-frequency, a living antenna capable of interpreting, amplifying and projecting the true static, the foundational pulse, to override the corruption. He was the immune system of reality, and the object now inextricably linked to him was the primary organ of that defense. It was a bridge, a translator, a focusing lens for the immense power now coursing through him. It was the key to not just understanding the language, but to speaking it with a force that could heal the fractured reality. But the transformation was a crucible. His individual thoughts, his personal history were not gone, but they were now merely strands in a much larger tapestry. The sense of self, the unique identity that defined Michael, was being stretched thin, integrated into a vast, impersonal current of information. There was a profound loneliness in this expansion, a terrifying isolation from the simple human world he had known. He felt connected to everything, yet detached from all personal connection. He was becoming a universal translator, but at the cost of his own voice. As this profound understanding settled within him, the house itself seemed to react. The old radio in the corner, long silent, suddenly sputtered to life, not with music or voices, but with a raw, guttural static, far more violent and dissonant than anything Michael had ever heard. It wasn't the pure, foundational static. It was the other static, the disruption itself, amplified, trying to assert its presence, to fight back against the awakening counter-frequency that Michael was becoming. The lights flickered, not just dimming, but shifting in hue, casting strange, unnatural shadows that danced with a malevolent intelligence. A distant siren wailed, then abruptly cut off, replaced by a garbled, inhuman shriek that grated against his newly sensitive hearing. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen pressures, vibrating with the wrong kind of energy. The anti-language was reacting, recognizing the emergence of its countermeasure, and it was pushing back, its influence manifesting more overtly in the physical world. Michael instinctively knew the source of this parasitic signal wasn't some cosmic entity or alien invasion in the conventional sense. It was more insidious, a foundational error, a corruption born from an act of profound ignorance or deliberate malice, now spreading like a cancer through the informational substrate of the universe. He perceived vectors, points of entry, concentrations of this wrong static like nodes in a vast dark network. One such node, he realized with a jolt that threatened to shatter his newly formed consciousness, was close. Dangerously close. The transformation wasn't complete. It was still ongoing. A relentless process that reshaped his very being. But he had crossed a threshold. He was no longer just Michael, the man who heard static on his radio. He was Michael, the living language, the nascent guardian of reality. He understood the stakes, the enemy, and his terrifying singular purpose. He had to find the primary node of this disruption, the central point from which the anti-language was broadcasting its corrosive message. He had to confront it, and he had to speak the truth of the original static with enough power to silence the lie. The world was unraveling, and he was the only one who could weave it back together. His journey had just truly begun. Michael's mind, once a labyrinth of theories and desperate whispers, was now a laser-focused instrument. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. The static wasn't just a signal. It was an anchor, a fundamental frequency of reality itself, corrupted by a parasitic overlay. This overlay, the corrosive message, was a sophisticated, insidious broadcast, not just of disinformation, but of misinformation designed to fracture perception. It wasn't about what people believed, but how they perceived the world around them. It was a slow, agonizing rewrite of consensus reality, turning neighbors into strangers, facts into fleeting opinions, and truth into a malleable construct. He grabbed his worn backpack, its contents now more precious than gold, the modified radio, the crude frequency analyzer he'd built, and the journal filled with his frantic, meticulous notes. He had to reach the source, or at least a powerful enough conduit, to amplify the original signal. His only hope was the old, abandoned transmission tower outside of town, a relic from the pre-digital age, its massive antenna still pointing defiantly skyward, a monument to a simpler time. If he could tap into its raw power, he might just have a chance to cut through the noise. His phone buzzed. It was Jessica. He hesitated, then answered. "Jessica, it's Michael. I know you think I'm losing it, but I figured it out. Everything. It's real. The static. It's not just a warning. It's the very fabric of everything, and someone's tearing it apart." Her voice was laced with concern. "Michael, where are you? You sound frantic. David and I have been worried sick. No time for that now. Listen, I need your help. You're the only one I trust with this. Remember that old tower, the one we used to climb as kids? The decommissioned one? I need to get there. I need to power it up. Can you access any schematics? Anything that tells me how to bypass the safety protocols for a full power surge?" There was a long pause. "Michael, that tower hasn't been active in decades. It's dangerous. What are you even talking about?" "They're altering reality, Jessica. It's not just a metaphor. People are forgetting things, seeing things that aren't there. Their emotions are being subtly manipulated. It's like a slow-motion mental plague, broadcast on a frequency just outside our conscious perception. The static is the pure signal, the antidote. I have to broadcast it. I have to override their signal before it's irreversible." He could hear her breathing, the disbelief warring with the urgency in his voice. "Override what signal, Michael? Who is they?" "I don't know who they are, not fully. But I know their message and I know how to fight it. Please, Jessica. Time is running out." He heard a sigh, then a determined click of keys in the background. "Okay, Michael. Tell me what you need. I'll see what I can find. But if this is another one of your wild goose chases, I swear. It's not. This is it. The end or a new beginning." He hung up, already moving. He knew the way to the tower, a winding path through dense woods, far from prying eyes. As he drove his old pickup truck, the radio, usually his trusted companion, was now a source of dread. He tuned it to the local news station. The anchor, a familiar face, reported on a sudden surge of mass confusion incidents across the city. People reporting seeing impossible things, hearing phantom sounds, experiencing profound disorientation. A growing sense of unease, a collective anxiety, was palpable in the reporter's voice. The corrosive message was escalating. It was no longer subtle. He saw it on the faces of strangers as he passed them. A blank stare, a flicker of confusion, a sudden inexplicable burst of anger or sadness. The world was unraveling. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Suddenly, a black sedan, sleek and unmarked, pulled out from a side street, accelerating rapidly to match his speed. It stayed a few car lengths behind him, not aggressive but persistent. A shiver ran down his spine. He wasn't alone in this fight, but he also wasn't unnoticed. They knew. He took a sharp turn onto a dirt road, hoping to lose them, kicking up a cloud of dust. The sedan followed undeterred, its headlights piercing the rising dust. Panic began to set in. He pushed the old truck faster, bouncing violently over potholes and roots. He couldn't afford to be caught, not now. Not when he was so close. He remembered a hidden turnoff, a barely visible trail leading deeper into the forest, used mostly by hunters. He swerved, nearly losing control, the truck protesting with a screech of tires. The sedan, caught off guard, overshot the turn, skidding to a halt. Michael didn't look back, plunging into the dense canopy, the trees closing around him like a protective embrace. He drove until the trail became impassable, then abandoned the truck, grabbing his backpack and flashlight. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. He could feel the pervasive hum of the corrosive message, a low-frequency pressure against his eardrums, growing stronger the closer he got to the source, or perhaps, the closer he got to challenging it. After an hour of hiking, he finally saw it. The silhouette of the old transmission tower, jagged against the moonless sky, a skeletal finger pointing to the heavens. It was even more imposing up close, a relic of raw power. Rust streaked its mighty frame, but its purpose, its potential, still hummed in the air. He found the access panel to the control room, rusted shut but not entirely impenetrable. Using a pry bar he'd forethoughtlessly packed, he forced it open, the screech of metal echoing eerily in the silent forest. The interior was dusty, cobweb-laden, but the main console, though ancient, seemed mostly intact. Wires hung like forgotten vines, and the smell of ozone and decay filled the air. He pulled out his modified radio, connecting it to the console's input with a tangle of jury-rigged cables. He needed to bypass the old system, feed his signal directly into the main amplifier, and then he needed power. Lots of it. His phone vibrated again. It was Jessica. "Michael, I found it. The schematics are ancient, but I think I understand. There's a manual override for the main power conduit, but it's incredibly risky. You'd be channeling raw energy directly through the antenna. It could overload and explode, taking out everything within a mile radius." "I understand the risk, Jessica. What do I do?" His voice was steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "You need to locate the primary power relay. It's behind a reinforced panel, usually marked with a lightning bolt symbol. There are two main circuit breakers, one for internal systems, one for the main antenna. You need to flip the antenna one first, then the internal. It's counterintuitive, but that's how it's designed to bypass the safety interlocks for emergency broadcasts. Then you'll have about 60 seconds to connect your frequency modulator to the primary output before the system automatically shuts down to prevent surges." 60 seconds, Michael. No more. Got it. Thank you, Jessica. You're a lifesaver. Just be careful, Michael. Please, don't be a hero. Just come home. Her voice cracked with genuine fear. "I'll try," he whispered, then disconnected. He found the reinforced panel. Its lightning bolt symbol faded but still visible. With immense effort, he wrenched it open, revealing a nest of thick, dusty cables and two massive levers. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the point of no return. He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the console, ensuring his makeshift connections were secure. He held his modified radio, its small screen flickering with the pure, unadulterated static frequency he had painstakingly isolated. This was the voice of reality, waiting to be heard again. He gripped the first lever, the one marked for the antenna. It was heavy, stiff with disuse. With a grunt, he pulled it down. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the floor, growing in intensity. Lights flickered to life across the console, ancient gauges springing to attention. The tower outside seemed to awaken, a low thrumming emanating from its colossal frame. Then, he pulled the second lever, the internal systems. The hum intensified, a powerful surge of energy coursing through the complex. The air crackled with ozone, and sparks danced across the exposed wiring. The countdown began in his head. 60 seconds. His hands flew, connecting the final wire from his frequency modulator to the primary output. The small screen on his radio glowed brighter, displaying the perfect, unwavering wavelength of the true static. He had done it. He had bridged the gap. Now he just needed to activate the broadcast. His finger hovered over the large red transmit button, the dust motes dancing in the sudden, eerie glow from the console. But just as he was about to press it, a jarring, high-pitched whine erupted from his radio, overriding the pure static. It was the corrosive message, amplified, distorted, screaming directly into his ears, a chilling, triumphant roar. The entire tower began to shake violently, the metal groaning under an immense, unseen pressure. The lights flickered, threatening to extinguish completely. Outside, he could hear a distant, unnatural wail growing louder, closer. The world was fighting back. Or rather, they were. They had found him, and they were not going to let him speak. The lights flickered, threatening to extinguish completely. Outside, he could hear a distant, unnatural wail growing louder, closer. The world was fighting back. Or rather, they were. They had found him, and they were not going to let him speak. But Michael wasn't giving up. Not yet. His hands, trembling but resolute, flew across the console. The emergency power light on his broadcast equipment glowed a sickly green, a testament to his foresight, to his desperate hope. The main lights in the shack died with a final mournful hum, plunging him into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint, eerie glow of his dials and screens. The wail outside was no longer distant. It was right there, pressing against the thin walls, vibrating through the very air. It wasn't a sound of wind or animal. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated interference, a tearing at the fabric of perception. He slammed a final switch, overriding the building's damaged circuits, channeling every last watt into the transmitter. The antenna outside, a skeletal silhouette against the bruised pre-dawn sky, now pulsed with a desperate energy. "This is it," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, yet imbued with a fierce resolve. He adjusted his microphone, pulling it close, the cold plastic a stark reality against his cheek. "To anyone out there," he began, his voice cracking slightly but quickly regaining its strength. "To anyone listening through the noise, through the static, my name is Michael Hayes, and I have something to tell you, something they don't want you to know, something they have worked tirelessly to keep hidden, to keep us from understanding." The wail outside intensified, morphing into a cacophony of distorted frequencies, a symphony of chaos that threatened to drown out his words. The air in the shack grew heavy, cold, charged with an invisible pressure. It felt like something was pushing in, not physically but dimensionally, a force trying to collapse the space around him. "The static," Michael continued, his voice rising, fighting against the encroaching din. "The constant low-frequency hum we all live with, the background noise of our lives. It's not just electromagnetic interference. It's not just random cosmic radiation. It's a language they speak, and a language they use to control us." He paused, taking a ragged breath, the effort visible even in the dim light. "For years I've been listening, deciphering, and what I found, it's not a conspiracy. It's far more fundamental. The static is the fabric of our perception. It's the constant, subliminal broadcast that shapes our thoughts, limits our understanding, keeps us complacent. It's the hum of the cage they've built around our minds." A sickening crackle erupted from his equipment, a sharp, violent sound that made him flinch. Sparks flew from the main console, showering the floor in momentary blinding light. The emergency power flickered, dipped, then held, a fragile testament to his stubborn will. "They are not some shadowy government agency," Michael asserted, his voice now imbued with a desperate urgency. "They are not aliens from a distant galaxy. They are a fundamental aspect of reality itself, an unseen intelligence that exists on a frequency just beyond our normal perception. And the static is their way of maintaining order. Their order. It's a constant, low-level stream of information, of suggestion, of control piped directly into our subconscious. It tells us what to desire, what to fear, what to believe is possible. It keeps us from looking too closely, from thinking too freely." The wail outside became a piercing shriek, a sound that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. The air within the shack grew impossibly cold, and a strange, shimmering distortion began to coalesce in the corners of the room, like heat haze but cold and utterly wrong. It wasn't a physical entity, not a monster with teeth and claws, but something far more terrifying. A tear in the veil, a manifestation of pure, unadulterated static made visible. It pulsed, a dark, hungry void that seemed to drink the light. "They don't want us to know," Michael pleaded, his voice ragged now, strained against the overwhelming interference, "because once you hear the static for what it truly is, once you understand it as a language, you start to hear the silence beneath it, the truth, the vast, limitless possibilities they've been suppressing, the freedom they've denied us." He coughed, a dry, rasping sound. The static distortion in the room pulsed closer, expanding, consuming the faint glow of his equipment, wrapping around him like an invisible shroud. He could feel it, a cold, crushing pressure on his chest, on his mind. It was trying to erase him, to silence him not just physically, but from existence itself. "Listen!" he screamed, a primal cry of defiance. "Listen closely. Not to the noise, but through it. Question everything that feels normal. That quiet whisper in your head, that sudden urge, that inexplicable fear. Is it truly yours? Or is it merely a well-placed suggestion, delivered on a frequency you were never meant to perceive?" The microphone in his hand began to spark violently, sizzling as if plunged into water. The screens on his console went dark, one by one, their internal components failing under the assault. The emergency power light flickered one last time, a dying ember, before winking out completely. The room was plunged into absolute darkness, save for the terrifying, shimmering void that now filled the entire space, pulsing with an unnatural silent energy. Michael's voice, however, still fought through, a desperate, final transmission. "The static is a language, and it's speaking to you, constantly, telling you what to be, what to think. Don't listen to their words. Listen to the silence. The truth is there, just beyond the noise." His voice dissolved into a strangled gasp, cut short by a final deafening burst of pure, unadulterated static that erupted from the dying equipment, a sound so violent it felt like his eardrums would rupture. Then just as suddenly it all stopped. The wail outside ceased. The shimmering distortion in the room vanished. The air impossibly became still. A profound, absolute silence descended, deeper and more unsettling than any noise could ever be. The kind of silence that feels like an absence, a void where something vital used to be. The kind of silence that implies not peace, but erasure. Outside, the first faint hints of dawn began to paint the horizon, oblivious. The world continued its slow, inexorable spin. The radio tower still stood, an inert sentinel against the brightening sky, its purpose seemingly forgotten. Days later, when Sarah and David finally, cautiously, ventured to the remote shack, they found it empty. The equipment was fused, melted, and twisted into grotesque sculptures of plastic and metal. There was no sign of Michael. No struggle, no forced entry, no trace. Just the lingering scent of ozone and something else, something cold and utterly alien, that seemed to cling to the air like a memory of a scream. Sarah, her face pale, stared at the ruined console. "He got something out, didn't he?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. David, his eyes scanning the impossible devastation, nodded slowly. "I don't know what. My shortwave picked up a burst right before everything went dead. Just a fraction of a second, but it wasn't just static. It was structured, like a word. A single, compressed, terrifying word." "What word?" Sarah asked, her breath catching in her throat. David shook his head, his gaze distant, haunted. "I couldn't make it out. It was too fast, too distorted. But it felt wrong. Like it burrowed into my mind without me even understanding it." He paused, then looked at Sarah, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible realization. "But I think Michael wasn't just trying to broadcast a message. I think he was trying to teach us how to listen to the static differently. To hear what's always been there, hidden in plain sight." Sarah reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold, dead metal of Michael's microphone. She closed her eyes, listening. And for the first time truly listening. The distant hum of power lines, the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind, the almost imperceptible thrum of the world. It wasn't just background noise anymore. It felt like a low, constant whisper, a language. And once you hear it, once you understand that the static isn't just noise, but a constant, pervasive hum of control, a whisper in the subconscious mind, you can never unhear it. It's always there, a subtle current beneath the surface of everything. And the terrifying question isn't whether Michael succeeded in getting his message out, but whether now you can hear it too. That constant, low, almost imperceptible whisper in the background of your own life. The static, always listening, always speaking, and now you know what it's saying. Or at least you know to wonder,